All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Modernizing Historic Preservation webinar. My name is Shane Gallagher. I am the product manager of 76 Unboxed, and I am excited to get to tell you guys today about ways that 76 Unboxed can help modernize historic preservation. The challenge today with historic preservation, go ahead to the next slide, please, is that it's very easy for history to disappear. And the reason often is that there is no great centralized archive today of history. We've all experienced those moments where we find out the coolest thing we've ever heard about a historical property based on a story someone told us. That perhaps if you go way back to physical newspapers, it eventually was captured, but in many cases, it was not. So a lot of history is hidden or captured in people's minds. So not necessarily hidden deliberately, but just not in an easily accessible way, particularly considering all of the technology we have available to us today to amplify and share these stories. We also have artifacts that eventually can get lost as everything's gone digital. Not everyone has digitized all of the physical materials, and they are subject to deterioration over time. And then finally, as we recently saw where we're located in central Pennsylvania. There was quite a few storms that came by, and there was actually just confirmation from the National Weather Service earlier this morning that a tornado did briefly touch down in the area. So things like that can cause the loss of history either via the records associated with it or the buildings. Um, and so that's where it's a challenge to get all this history together, particularly because there's a lot of different stakeholders that all have the same mission of preserving history, but each have different views, perspectives, and pieces of this total puzzle. Um, Go ahead to the next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lane Thompson, who is a senior vice president here at JMA Resources. But today he's really speaking to you and drawing from his experience as the city administrator for the town of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, where he saw how these different stakeholders often struggle to come together in order to really preserve this history. Lane, over to you.
Thank you, Shane. I have to admit that most of my scars are not visible from the outside from being a city manager, but this slide in particular brings back some of the more the more dramatic disconnects in city management. And I think this picture that you can see right in front of you really demonstrates this interconnectedness of needs within a community to help connect the historic districts within your town. From my perspective as a local government administrator, I dealt with the Historic Architecture Review Board. I dealt with the Downtown Partnership, which is a kind of a local nonprofit that helps with economic development. And we definitely suffered from a lack of proper record keeping. We suffered from a lot, just a ton of personally held knowledge within the staff that wasn't really properly or effectively communicated or used for its intended purpose. We lacked public access, not from the perspective of we were hiding things from the public, but really because we didn't have the tools and mechanisms available to us to share information. And then manual record keeping, we really did rely a lot on our standard Microsoft Office suite of products, Word and a lot of Excel spreadsheets. And I think nothing can take the enthusiasm out of historic preservation than an Excel spreadsheet listing all the historic properties in a town. Um, Likewise, the historical associations that I experienced, the Historical Society downtown, the Library Association, the Museum Association, they all had similar goals, but they also had similar problems. Funding resource limitations led to outdated websites. most of their archives, just like kind of Shane was alluding to, were still sitting in boxes and hadn't been digitized. There's a lot of effort going into that these days. Um, but that digitization often comes with that tail question of, okay, so what do I do with it once I digitize it? Like if I'm just digitizing a photograph and then storing it on a hard drive in the museum, then has it really done anybody any good? Or am I just modernizing my problem? And then that knowledge does fade away. People retire. Our historical associations are led by almost the majority of retirees who had professional lives, and they're looking at retiring again, and so that knowledge fades away. Um, they have the same outreach challenges that any other small budget organization has, in that they need information and they need to give information, but their tools are not the best in the world. And you can imagine everybody knows what it feels like to be a homeowner or an aspiring homeowner. And if you put yourself in the context of an aspiring historic homeowner, those folks really are on a spectrum from I'm only interested in compliance with local historic preservation ordinances, all the way through I'm an enthusiastic preservationist who really wants to buy this property and I want to return it to its glory days, and then I want to show it off. They suffer from the same, which is um, in their attic, in a box, sits the history of that property. And that's a best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the previous homeowner took that box with them, and I think that you'll experience that as well. Um, Homes and historic properties aren't really managed with a universal kind of approach. Like there's always a history of uh, people in America through various things, 23andMe, but also various public websites on historical figures that you can kind of work through and trace the history of. Property is very difficult to manage over time, and that history is very dispersed. There's definitely not a central place where these historical records are kept, nor in those cases where there's a platform, nor is that information advertised out as, hey, come and look at me. It's really preserved for people who are very focused on one particular aspect of preservation, like say the Brickworks Association of America, that really has some platform of managing old brick building records, but all that is about what type of bricks they had. It really doesn't take the history of the home into or the property into context. Um, Everybody knows what confusing ordinances look like. If you live anywhere and are subject to local laws, historic properties really do suffer from trying to comply with confusing ordinances, but um, at the same time, accomplish their mission as a homeowner, which is to really love their home and show it off to their neighbors. The interconnectedness of these slides, these items, local government, historic associations, and historic homeowners, that interconnectedness is what really keeps the whole preservation and historic outreach moving forward. But boy, is it at a very slow speed. Can you go to the next slide, Jimmy? So what you'll see in um, this interconnected relationship is that history and the preservation of properties really does drive economic development. That's the goal of a city manager. The mission is economic prosperity and service delivery within their municipality. And you really can't get there if your historic downtown is suffering from, just being run down, not being effectively managed from a preservation perspective, but also of not being advertised out and not being celebrated. And I think that's what you'll see is that these interconnected goals across local government of, the local governments, they definitely need to provide local government services and enforce compliance, but boy, do they also have to try their best in every avenue available to drive economic development. For a lot of towns in America, the single cornerstone they have for economic prosperity is their historic downtown. And they may not have, a mill that drives economic development. They may not have a nice restaurant or group of restaurants and bars that drive a nightlife that sustain economic development within their downtown. But they sure enough do have a wonderful history of historic properties that they can really leverage to drive that economic development. Those historic associations are out there to help do that. Some of them have the mission of, hey, I just want to capture history, and because we have a group of a community of interested people who love to talk about history, but they also have the need to get out and evangelize that history. They want to take that history out into the community, and I think that all of those historic associations have kind of that shared goal with that local government of there's history and that history has value, and I want to bring that value out to the masses. For local governments, that value is in economic prosperity. For historical associations, that value is often in knowledge sharing and the growth of just the human body of knowledge and history. And for homeowners, that value is in understanding where their property comes from. You can go from that bottom level of that practical, like, why is there a crack in my basement? That goes from one corner to the other. Is that really just from wear and tear, or was there something that happened to this property in its lifetime? All the way up to, boy, how do I get people to want to come visit my property because I love it, and I happen to know that there's some amazing and exciting history about it. But I'm not going to go on the standard social media and say, "Hey, just me, come look at my property." What I want to do is link that together with everybody else in my community who wants to do the same thing and drive that connectedness, that interconnectedness with each other. Can you go on to the next slide, Yumi? And so we have the dilemma. Um, this interconnectedness that we were just talking about is really in spirit only. Um, the the um, the system is broken. The system that is supposed to connect the government folks with the historical associations with the homeowners, that system is broken. It's broken because although the goals are shared, they're not shared in totality. They're kind of in parallel. And that kind of slight deviation in each other's particular missions has caused them to just kind of mature in different ways. And what happens is the relationships are implied, and implied relationships ultimately, break down and fail because they kind of, if you look across there, they rely on a system of, like, on the right, government records. Those are paid employees who manage those things. Paid employees, government folks who follow policy, follow practice. In the historical associations and in these historical archives, you're talking about mostly volunteers. And volunteers are passionate about what they do, but volunteers also are not 100% dedicated to the work they're doing every day, right? They have other things that they do, both professionally and personally. So they're limited in their time that they devote to this. But then also, they express their volunteerism really in direct alignment with their own mission, not in the tangential missions of these other areas, like the government and like the homeowner. And that loose connection between government, between nonprofit and historical associations, and between homeowners, that loose connection is not enough. The implied relationship is not going to be enough. The government is always, you can count on government activities, especially local ones, to do what they need to do to accomplish the job they've been given, right? Um, you know, Completing an inventory on a spreadsheet, you know, exercising their requirement to do permitting, um, you know, doing the city planning and giving the proper designation to properties. They do that work, but they don't have a mission to fulfill that same mission of the historical associations that are trying to build history. If you walk into a government office and say, "Hey, I'm interested in building an addition on the back of my historic property," they're not going to say, "Oh, that's an amazing property." And if you look here at how far it's come since the 200 years that it's been in existence, the city government is not in a position to do that. The city government is going to spend their time talking about the current regulations you need to follow, and how how close to the edge of the property you can build this addition and that kind of stuff. The historical archivist, the historical society person, if you talk to them about building addition on on your historic property, they're going to say, "Don't do it. You're ruining history. You're going to build this modern looking addition, and that home was never supposed to have a sunroom on the back. And for God's sakes, take that baby pool out, right?" Like the historic folks have a different mission, and this fragmented grouping, again, that's driven by implied relationships, not explicit relationships, causes that history and that information to be fragmented. And once it fragments, it begins to disappear. And the bottom line for me as a former city manager and having interacted with all these organizations and with so many historic property owners over time, the bottom line for me is that the current state of resources available, relationships, and history preservation is just not enough. And we're failing, and the history is disappearing. However, I think that when I left the government and when I started working here at JMA, I handed our research and development team a problem, which is the problem we just reviewed. And in response to that, they have delivered a solution. And I think Shane is going to come and tell you a little bit more about that solution.
Thank you, Lane. And that's why I'm so excited to be the product manager of 76 Unboxed. As the name implies, we are unboxing this history, and we're doing it by becoming a unified platform to bring the community together. And by community, I mean local governments, historic associations, and historic homeowners, but really all homeowners, because if your home is newer, it's simply history in the making. And by bringing these different people together, they each have a perspective that all contributes to a shared history and really creating the totality of the story of an individual property. And that's what we are super excited to have done with 76 Unbox and really address these different stakeholders in different ways. And so while I could spend a lot of time talking about this, seeing is believing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Yumi, who's our product operations manager, and let her give you a demo of how this works. So we have two different demos, but I'll let her give you the overview of those and walk you through it. Yumi, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. All right. As Shane said, we have two demos today. The first one is going to be with Mechanicsburg. Mechanicsburg is a small Pennsylvania town, really close to us. We partnered with them as a pilot town as we were building 76 Unboxed. This is going to be the city planner view, so more of the management aspect. The next one is going to be more of a homeowner view. So let me stop sharing here for a second and switch over. All right. Just confirming we can see Mechanicsburg historic. Perfect. All right. So this is Mechanicsburg's 76 Unboxed site. The first thing I want you to notice before we even dive into what 76 Unboxed does is the theming of this. This was very purposeful. This is actually their official town page. And so we wanted the theming to reflect the community that it's representing because really this is your community site. So just a quick overview as you go down, we have announcements, some featured properties. As you can see, we have an interactive map here. You can go into satellite and you can even start looking at the different buildings in your community. On the right, we also have a list of all the properties there. We have a meeting view here, and then we also have a small paragraph telling a little bit about your town or community. All right. So let's dive into the management aspect. So this is your control center for everything happening in your district. It's organized into three main areas. We have the properties, community, and content. So starting with properties, this tile is going to be my properties. This is your personal view. So any properties that you personally own or manage directly. Property list is going to be the big one. So this is where you browse, search, you can edit every property in your district. Map editor, this is a fun one and an important one, but also fun. So this is where you can actually go into your district and create the outline. So we can subdivide this, we can make any changes that we want. And really this is useful when you need to correct any parcel lines or new property needs to be added. We're gonna discard this for Mechanicsburg. Um,
You mean I love that feature really because the um as a city manager, you're constantly being asked questions about what would happen if we remove this street or remove this block or remove these properties from the district. What would then the district look like and what would be contained? Or hey, if we added this whole street, what are the properties that would be within the new district? I love the idea that we can do that modeling here. And I think the planning offices and historic commissions are really going to love this capability.
All right. And then the property tags and property types. This lets you define the labels and icons used across the platform. We always joke, everyone loves telling us their ghost stories. So this is where you can go in and you can put a haunted icon if you wanted, and you can tag any properties that are haunted, or the ghosts or whatever the story is there, you can add that in there. Going over to community. So this is everything related to resident engagement. So we have discussions, lets you view and participate in any ongoing discussions. Discussion forums. So this is where you can configure the categories and forums themselves. So the structure that residents will post into. Discussion moderation, I want to click into this one. So this is important. This is your safety net. With discussions, there's always the discussion around safety. As you can see, nothing's unreviewed here. But if you go to all, you can see all the content that's been put into the system and that it has been approved. And just as a side note, we do have levels in place in the system that don't allow certain content to go through. We want this to be a safe place where we're going to share stories and share history. So we do have those levels of safety in place already.
So Yumi, for those attending today, I talked about that disconnection between the three entities, the government, the nonprofits, and the historic societies, and then the property owners. These discussion groups are forums that bring all of those folks together in the same platform. And I think this is one of those groundbreaking kind of game changers for the community that gets at solving that disconnectedness. The very first step is connect them. Let them talk to each other in asynchronous mode so that they can start understanding how to move forward together. So I love this feature, Yumi. Thanks.
Yep. Announcements is how you're going to push information out. So any district news, public hearing notices, scam alerts, anything like that can push out their announcements. Events, pretty straightforward. Lets you schedule and manage any community events or meetings. And users is where you're going to manage any of the roles, who has access to what across your entire district. And then content, so this is the fun stuff, right? This is where you're going to shape what your public-facing district site actually looks like. So this is how we get Mechanicsburg to look like Mechanicsburg. And you'll see in the next demo here shortly, this is how we also get Frostburg to look like Frostburg. So homepage controls the layout, the content. You can also put awards on your district's front page. The about, this was the section at the bottom, that small paragraph about your community, your district. Resources, this manages your FAQs, any fillable forms that you need to provide to your community. This is where you'd post that. And theming is exactly what it sounds like. This is your branding control. So colors, logos, everything that makes this feel like your community or your district. Banners lets you create site-wide notification banners. Like Shane alluded to, we had a major storm come through here. So this could be something where you post anything major that you need to get out to your community. Um, Ad manager, I think Lane and or Shane is going to talk about this a little bit more later, a little bit more about the capabilities and how you can utilize this to your best advantage. But this is where you're going to configure any advertisement places if your district is going to run any local ads. And director types lets you configure the different roles shown on your about page. So if you want to put mayor, any council, the historic board, this is where that all goes in. All right, let me stop share.
While you're changing out, I just want to go back and make sure that folks kind of keep in mind two critical things that we showed in that demo. Um, the first critical thing that we showed is an inventory of all the properties. Like imagine that. We've overcome now, just in that short demo, we've overcome this disconnect in record keeping. We now have an inventory of 100% of the properties in a town with the ability to put photographs and history and ownership and you'll see what Yumi's going to show you in a minute, all the different things that a homeowner can do with that. But overcoming that very first obstacle of what do I do with all this information? We've done that here, and you can see that in that inventory. The second thing that we overcame with that very short demo in the first one is bringing the community together in communication. So inventory of properties and then single platform for communication. Those two things, massive game changers in historic preservation for local communities. Go ahead, Yumi. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. So this next one is meet Erica. So Erica lives in Frostburg, Maryland. If you've never been, it's a beautiful little historic town. There's a college there. So she's owned her home for 11 years. And really this is going to show you the homeowner view and what their dashboard looks like. So let me switch screens here again. Alrighty. So this is Frostburg, and again, I just want to show you, whoops, it didn't get my share. Here
There
we
we go.
go. Now here's Frostburg. All right. So again, here's Frostburg. I want to show you again the theming here so we can see the difference between Mechanicsburg and Frostburg. And then I'm going to actually take you to their official site. So this is the city of Frostburg's official site here. And this is their 76 Unboxed site. So again, this is their 76 Unboxed site. This reflects their community in their history and also the look and feel of it. Um, so we're gonna take you to, let's take you to Erica's house. So this is Erica's house. We can either access it through here or you can click on the map directly. So you can see a couple things. Oh, whoops. There we go. This is Erica's house. So this is Erica's house. So a couple things you'll see about this property, history and timeline, residents, some photos, and owner's notes. So this is just the property profile, but let's actually go into what you're gonna see as a dashboard here. All right, perfect. So this is the property dashboard once it's been claimed. This is your home base for everything. So in property details, this is your kind of foundation. So the address, the year built, the basics, kind of like bedrooms, bathroom, size lot. And you don't have to have everything filled in. As Shane said, this is this is a place for you to start your home's history. So whether you bought a historic home and you're trying to gather the information, or you have a brand new home, this is where the history starts and we can keep building on it. Um, see, we have the property description. So this is a short paragraph in your own words about your property. Any tags, this is where you can put that haunted, if you have a ghost you want to tell us about, this is where that can go in. And owner details that you want to share. History and timeline. I think this is the one that I get most excited about. So this is where you can really capture your home's entire story. And here's where you would add an entry. You can add in the entry type here, title it, put a description, date, and we can change the timeline here according to the dates and how you want to construct that. So this is just a record that keeps accumulating over time, however long the owner has lived here.
Hear me real quick. I think this is a good point to pause and take inventory on game changer number three. And that game changer number three is a simple, very user-friendly method for actually codifying that history, for capturing it, putting it into a single platform so that it can be maintained, preserved, but then also when you'll see from the community side, you'll have access for the public to go and see the history. And this is what's so amazing about 76 Unboxed and what we're bringing to the to solve the problem is this captures the history. This takes all of those boxed up information sets that people have, takes all of those needs and just puts them in one place. And if you look across the tabs at the top of this screen, property details, history and timeline, residence, photos, change requests, activities, this is the solution set that connects all of those previously disconnected functions between government, the historical nonprofits, and the property owners. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, no problem. And then going into residence, so this is capturing who's called this place home. So any past owners that you know of, occupants, people behind the address. And photos. We love photos. So Erica has added these really cool photos in. So she has three photos of the front of her house, but you can see on that main property page, this is kind of that cover photo. Um, but she also has this really unique one where, you know, you can post any historic photos that you found or you've had. This is so cool. We actually got to walk this and see it in real life in modern day, and it still stands. It looks beautiful, and it's a really important piece of her property and the town's history. All right, and then you can see cute cat, but you can see the level of detail that we can add into here. So really want to just showcase everything about the house, the big picture, any details that you want to add, you can put that all in right here. Change request. So every edit an owner submits will have a visible status right here. So whether it's pending, approved or denied. So this is your truth to any change requests that you have posted, and you can see what the status is there. And then the last piece here is the activity. So this is kind of the running history of your property's edits itself right in this tab. Anyways, so that is, let me stop sharing. So that finishes the two demos for the homeowner and for the district community. So I think over back to Shane.
Yep, thank you, Yumi. So as you've seen, we have a lot of great functionality. One of the really cool things that I want to kind of drive to all of you on today is we just went live nationwide on 6/1. So joining in today, you are what in today's current lingo would be called the OGs, also known as just some of the original people of the platform. So what's really exciting is to see not just where we are, but a lot of the great things um, that my team, is currently working on. For example, we're going to have photo attachments directly on timeline events coming in roughly the next month or so here. We're going to have the ability to cite sources for specific photos and specific timeline events to help add some additional validity to these items. And a source could just be a person's name. Again, if it's one of these stories that a homeowner is sharing, that is a very valid source. But there's other times where, like, for example, one of the big historical events of my home was surviving the Harrisburg floods in Agnes in 1976, which again, that event predates me, but is an exciting thing to kind of know about and understand that the water would have come up to the first floor of my home, but my home fortunately was able to preserve the original wood flooring. So I still have the very thin wood boards, which is different than kind of what's in vogue today with slightly wider boards that you see often being put in new modern homes. And one of the key things I do want to note on here that I alluded to earlier is modern homes, while it may seem like this platform isn't for them, it's actually a really exciting opportunity because imagine how one of these pages would look if someone today, entering their late 20s, buying their first home for their family, started putting the history in. Imagine what that would look like to the third owner of that property that already has so much filled out and is kind of a gift you can give to the future owners and next generation. So one of the things that I do want to call out is while this is an exciting opportunity to get on board and be one of the original users of the platform, we do have two communities that are already using it. They are at different points of the overall adoption, but we have Mechanicsburg and Frostburg, which we both have mentioned. So Mechanicsburg has 822 properties in its historic district, with Frostburg having 449. And you see that we've highlighted two of these. As Yumi mentioned earlier, this can be a cost neutral solution with the opportunities that we have for what we call advertising. And just to clarify a little bit with the language there, a lot of towns today might think, oh, we don't do advertising, but most towns do what they call sponsorship, where a business can say, hey, this is a great thing. I'd like to contribute to the town. Part of our brand is based on um, the history that we have with either this town or this region. And we did deliberately price this platform in a way that even small and mid-sized businesses could be that type of sponsor to really provide this for a historic district. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, we're going to talk about next steps at the end of the presentation, but there is some really great opportunities and some frameworks we can share with you to help reach out to businesses and potentially have this be cost neutral. We know that one of the biggest challenges for local governments isn't so much how to pay for certain things, but that any net new cost does require a level of approval, has to be in a budget. And that's why we felt finding ways to make it cost neutral could really help speed adoption because it changes the conversation and the types of approvals that you would need in advance of moving forward. So if we continue on to the next slide, again, modern preservation is collaborative. And that's not a new thing. What's new, though, is all the technology that we have to do this collaboration. So if you trace back, I don't know the exact year, but storytelling traces back in history far beyond when we even had written language, right? You used to have people in tribes who their entire function was to preserve stories. And the interesting thing is we're here in 2026 with the ability to store more data on our cell phones than those early, generations might have had in entire culture's history, but yet we haven't really deployed it in a way that brings local governments, historical associations, and homeowners together. And so what we're really excited about, and what I'm extremely excited about as a previous vice president of Harrisburg's Historic Association, is the ability to have a platform where local governments can get the official records in. We can see what permits happened to a property and all of that. Associations can help add context to some of these permits around why did we see for a set of properties all these permits at the same time? Well, in my neighborhood, it was because it was after the Agnes flood and people had to do repairs. And so that's an important context because you might see a period of time where a preservation focused person is like, well, why did so many homes modernize at the same time? And it's like, well, they kind of had to. And to a certain extent, depending on the insurance that you had on the property, you may not be able to get all of the original materials. It may not cover that cost, depending upon, what you do there and what happens in that space. And that's a helpful context to understand why entire neighborhoods changed at once. And then for homeowners, again, a great way to become more connected to your home, right? Home ownership is one of those great American hallmarks where we're a country that has enough land and brought together the right type of financing structures to make it available to a larger percentage of the population than used to happen, around the globe for middle class. And it's a great way to really showcase that these are not um, properties, these are homes, these are places we lived in. There's stories that we can tell relevant to it, and then really bring that all together to help preserve it. And at the end of the day, when these properties become more than just another address to the community, it helps support historic preservation, which helps support economic development and helps really give people a reason to better connect with their community for all of these wonderful things we've talked about. So without further ado, I do want to talk about how you can engage with us next. This webinar gives you a great high-level overview. Yumi did an awesome job with these two demos, but we know that each association, each local government does have unique considerations and needs. And because we're still a young platform, you're still kind of original people, we still are at the point that we can support individualized free calls with you where we understand your specific needs, show you the specific features that would help, start to talk about how we could help onboard you. And again, start to get some sponsorship. So this could be very low or no cost, directly to your association or your local government. We would love to connect with you. Everyone who's attending today or who registered, even if they couldn't attend live, will get a follow-up email with this information. We also have the QR code on there if you want to take a quick photo with that. But this will take you directly to the demo page on our website. From there, there's two additional videos. You can kind of skip past those because today's demos are more comprehensive than that. And then right under that, there is a link where you can fill out a quick form. We get a little bit of information from you, and then we go ahead and respond. Again, we're a small team right now, so that form goes directly to a human. There's no AI processing it or anything like that. It doesn't go into some workflow. And we will respond to you and set up a time to meet with you. Generally, we are available Monday to Friday from roughly 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. So during that window, we can accommodate really all time zones across the US. Generally pretty easily, and with enough advance notice, we can go a little later in the evening to accommodate our friends over on the West Coast there. So now we did leave about 15 minutes deliberately for any one, technical issues, or two, more importantly, any questions. So if you have used Zoom webinar before, you're probably familiar with this, but if you haven't, if you move your mouse, you should see a black toolbar come up at the bottom. In around the center, you should see a giant question mark with Q&A. You can ask questions directly in there, and Yumi is going to serve as our moderator, and I think we even have one or two questions we got in advance that we will start with while we give you time to take in everything we've talked about today and see if you have any questions. And then Lane and I will kind of serve on the panel and answer questions. I'll take questions more related to the product, and Lane can jump in with his city administrator background. Yumi, I think we had, if you want to start with one or two of those questions we received in advance, that would be great while we give people time to ask their own.
Yeah. So one of the questions we had was, how do I import my district's existing documents and information into 76 Unboxed?
Sure. So this is a great question. And this is one of those it depends answers, which I know we all hate, but we have a number of ways that, depending upon how your district is maintaining official records, we can do some initial imports of data. So generally, with any district, we start with the inventory. And as we showed you on the mapping screen, there's two ways we can go about that. If you already have a solid inventory of the historic properties, we can load those in and it populates the map. The other thing is if you have an inventory, it's in an Excel sheet. You say to us, we think it's 85 to 90% accurate, or even less. Then what we can do is sit there with you and draw out the banners, the borders of the property. And with that, we can then have it generate the property. So we are using a GIS tool set, a graphical information system, where once we draw out that polygon on the map, it's able to identify all the properties within it. And then we can actually potentially help you update your inventory. When we start to talk about then getting additional information in, there is a number of different ways we can do that. We actually use ArcGIS as our mapping and GIS vendor. A number of counties and communities use that as well. So there are some ways that we can natively pull in data from that, and potentially make it a very low or little effort to you technologically. So again, high level, we can work with you to get data loaded in. If the data is needs some enhancement or it's in a paper form at the moment, our GIS mapping really helps us get that inventory very quickly, by literally sitting down and drawing the lines appropriately.
All right. Another question we had was, how do we get history into the properties and is it pre-populated?
So in our current state, there is no pre-population of information. So the way that things get in today is one, we source the data we can get from you. Two, we do engagement campaigns with your local community. We have some templates that can be easily adapted for email campaigns, Facebook pages that a lot of communities have, posting on your website. We have designs that you can take and put on your website that help promote this. We also have some outreach strategies where if you also have a local historical society or association, we can reach out through that as well and help create like a community effort around it. So that is current state. Future state, we are going to be working roughly in, let's call it the next 6 months to a year, to start to automatically bring in certain sets of data. So for example, I referenced the Agnes floods that impacted my property. A lot of storm and major weather event stuff is publicly available information that we can get from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or if it was a big enough event, from federal emergency management records. So we are going to start bringing in a lot of those public records. If we look out a little further in, say, the 12 to 18 month time period, there are some additional data sets that are private. You have to pay a little bit for, but that we could start pulling in. Insurance companies today use some great data sets that give them a lot of information about properties. So my answer is kind of twofold. Today, it is a community-driven process, which the great thing about is it helps get those stories in that we won't find in any other records that are in people's brains at the moment. The downside of it is it can feel daunting to someone who is in a 100-year home. So we are working on bringing in other data sets. And eventually, if you've ever used ancestry.com, we envision a scenario where you log into your property and we know some things for sure. There's some other things that we have a high degree of confidence might apply to your property. And we create an experience where you can help discover things about your property while help us build out the complete story.
Yeah, I just had to share that one because kind of what you touched on was our mission of 76 Unboxed really is here to not only bring in the data but also capture the stories that aren't in a data set, right? Like the handprints in the sidewalk. Like I want to know like whose handprints are those and how does that all connect? So I was excited when I saw that one. Um Another question we had was who can see my property's profile page and asking if it was public.
Sure. So the property profile page, um, in and of itself, is public. We are going to be rolling out features where you could create your story at that property. So think of it as I'm going to add an event to the timeline. And one of the things that we'll ask you is this an event that's public interest or is this kind of private? Now, full disclosure, this feature is likely going to be in what we call 76 Pro, which is the paid offering for homeowners. Now, if you are a community that purchases 76 Unboxed, everyone within the district that you outline gets 76 Pro included to really make it a community effort. And it does make the pricing per house become very cost effective. But homeowners can also purchase it on their own if they're not in a district or if they are, just interested in doing it. But one of the neat things is that they will be able to create a curated story. So, for example, let's say they want to create a view of the home that includes the history of the structure, but also the history of their family's growth. So, they're going to include when their first child, Bobby, was born in the home, right? They might want to keep that as kind of a more private thing. And then they'll be able to share a view of this with family and friends via a hidden link. If you've ever used YouTube, you have the ability to create links that search engines don't find and you have to access it. But they'd have the ability to create that type of feature. So that is something, again, that we have on our roadmap. We're going to be rolling out in the next few months in order to allow you to do that. So one of the, again, cool things about the platform is we do maintain the public community controlled view of the property, and then we have the personal one. For those of you from local governments, there is also the notion of kind of validated data. So for example, for every property within a district, governments maintain what is generally needed for property value management and property taxation in jurisdiction where that applies. And so generally that's your square footage, your bedrooms, your bathrooms, your number of stories, and that type of information. So going back to the earlier data sourcing question, if we are directly sourcing that with you, we do have ways to display that as verified data. And again, one of the things that we're really excited about is, as I mentioned, we have two communities on right now. As a product manager, I really like to get feedback from around 5 to 8 data points. So we have opportunities for some of you to really come in as an original person. And one of the cool things is that you would be able to help shape the future. So again, it is a shared platform that we build to accommodate a large variety of communities. But if you're one of the early 5 to 8 people that we get to work closely with, see how you're using it, then it's also an opportunity for you to give very direct feedback to the product team in a way that, like a year from now, when we have 3 dozen, 4 dozen, or more communities on board, we won't be able to support that type of one-on-one thing. So, again, just an exciting thing to kind of encourage you that if you're interested in this, sooner rather than later could have some perks to it. Again, full disclosure, you are going to be, trying something out that we're still actively enhancing. But we'd love to partner with it and help tailor it to kind of your needs and the needs of really local governments and historic associations around the country.
Perfect.
I think, Yumi, we have time for probably one more question, so that we leave time to just wrap up with final contact information and all of that.
Perfect. And I think that a perfect one here is the what does implementation look like for districts?
Sure. So implementation for districts is very quick and very easy from a platform standpoint. So as Yumi showed you, you really, theoretically speaking, could get activated on Monday, build out your map, and be live by Friday in terms of having the site up, having everything good to go. The bigger part of the implementation is getting the community engaged, getting people to know about the platform, getting people to use it. And that's what we've seen with Mechanicsburg and Frostburg. And I was just at a meeting with Mechanicsburg's Historical Architecture Review Board this week and talking about how this adoption process, even though it's a lie, it's out there and available, is something that's going to continue throughout the rest of this year. So from the IT standpoint, we can get you up and running pretty quickly. Now, again, depending on how much data you want to preload into your inventory, that can add time to it. But one of the neat things is that doesn't have to stop us. We can get, as soon as we have the property inventory, we get your brand colors and things from you. We get that set up. We can launch it. And then as we get to the point in the process that we have other data sets available, we can load them in and it seamlessly merges in with the information that people have been directly putting in the community-driven way. So we can move very quickly through this with you, and then again, add data sets over time as they become available. Now, with that said, generally speaking, I would say for most communities, we are looking at probably a 60 to 90-day time period from first conversation, providing you with the necessary documentation to review with elected officials, review with council as potentially needed, and then go ahead and get live. We've seen historic associations potentially move a little bit faster, depending on their size, simply because there's there's not legal frameworks and things they have to go through when bringing on a new solution like this. But so we generally can move quickly. A lot of the timeline is generally driven by processes that we work with you to go through with getting appropriate approvals. And then again, really the outreach campaign to the community is really an ongoing effort. All right, I think with that, we have exactly 1 minute left, so I don't know if we could have timed this better. So great job, guys, on sticking to your time periods. I did post to one question that had come in about how to contact us, but you'll see our email address is on there, info@76unboxed.com. Again, that is a shared box, but it literally, there's 3 people that has access to it. Actually, sorry, 4, me, Yumi, and then 2 other team members who are not on the webinar today. So that is human read and looked at every single day. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and email us there. Or if you are ready to set up a 30-minute session, go ahead, scan the QR code, or you'll get an email after this later today with a button you can click to go and request a demo. Feel free to invite other people to the demo. Feel free to just start with, us building a direct relationship. But again, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really, really appreciate it. And again, once Zoom finishes packaging up this recording, we will send a follow-up email that has a link to that as well. So if you want to share it to any other colleagues, that would be great. The one thing we do ask from you guys is if you found this helpful, we would love for you to share it to a colleague in a neighboring town, somewhere else in your state, to just let them know about us. Again, no pressure, no commitment, no obligation, but this is one of those things where it really does take a village, or in our case, a nation. But we're hoping that with the 250th anniversary of America, it's a great time to start preserving our history today. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.